Okay, all in favor of accepting the minutes with the correction of John being here? Aye. All opposed? I don't have any, no elected officials here tonight, so we'll do that. And I don't have anything to add, actually, so we can go directly to our audit report. This is Craig Gilman, the Managing Director of CBIS, IZ, and MHM LLC. He's going to give us a report on our audit.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm going to take you briefly through several pages of, there's some qualitative information about the audit, then the numbers. I'll take you through it relatively quickly. I'm not going to take you through all the numbers that you'll see here. If there are questions, just stop me and ask. If there's something that I skip over here, see if I can, okay, perfect. Work. Like I said, couple of pages here just talking about the nature of the audit results. So the first line that you see presented, the first block of information relates to the nature of the opinion that we'll issue on the audited financial statements. That will be a clean or unmodified report. So that's the result you'd expect. That's a good result. Nothing that was identified of any concern in that audit opinion. Then the second layer of information just refers to, if you look at the audited financial statements, there's basic financial statements and then supplementary information. The report that we issue, the audit report that we issue extends to that supplementary information. So that's really what's described there in that middle section. And then on the bottom, for all audits that we do, whether it be for an organization like PHCSA or a commercial entity, we focus on revenue recognition and the accounting for revenue, because typically that's where we find problems, really, for any entity, because typically there can be some complexity involved in how those transactions are accounted for. We didn't find problems for PHCSA, so that's a good result. But that's why we emphasize that, because we do spend a lot of our audit effort in that area to make sure that the revenue is recognized in the appropriate period. Last section here related to the audit results, the other matters that are listed here, no fraud or illegal acts were identified. If that was the case, you'd know about that before now, because we wouldn't wait until now to tell you. But just to emphasize that that was the case. No material uncertainties were identified. There would be some disclosure in the financial statements if there was uncertainties, but there aren't anything to include in that section. And then last item listed here, there were no significant changes to the planned audit strategy. That's a good result as well. It means that we weren't surprised by anything. There was nothing that when we put together the initial audit plan and then came to do the audit work that we were surprised by. So again, that's a good result. Questions on anything on those 2 pages? Okay.
Maybe just one.
Sure.
From a forensic accounting standpoint, when you're talking about fraud and illegal actions, there's stuff internal and there's stuff external.
Right.
How deep, what's your breadth? How far do you go on that? Just curious.
Well, the audit that we do is not a forensic audit. That's the first thing I would tell you. The purpose of the audit that we do is to issue an opinion on the fairness of the presentation of the numbers that I'm going to talk about. So, but as part of the audit process, we do a risk assessment and we look at internal control, which is there to prevent and detect fraud to some extent. If there are no controls in place, that means that we have to do a lot of work to get comfortable with the numbers. If the controls are what we'd expect them to be, functioning adequately and designed appropriately, then we can limit some of the other testing that we have to do to get comfortable with the numbers. The fraud that you're talking about, typically what we're focused on, if we think there's a risk of fraud because there aren't controls or there's other factors that might lead us to believe that, then we'll design testing to determine whether or not we think there's that's happening. And if so, then we're going to do a lot more work to see what's happening. External fraud, we really don't spend any time on because that's not really anything we can control. Are you talking about like phishing or?
Yeah, phishing security from outside, just hitting something, withdrawing money from our checking accounts, we don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, we look at some IT general controls, but we don't really spend a lot of time looking at whether or not somebody can penetrate the system or that you'd be more subject to a phishing attack than others. Sure, sure, sure. Anything else, sir? Okay. So some other audit matter items listed here on the left side. The only change in accounting policies in fiscal 2023 was an accounting standard that was required to be adopted related to how the organization accounts for leases. It didn't really have much of an impact, and I'll show you what the numbers were that were impacted by that when we get into the numbers. But that was the only accounting policy change in the prior fiscal year. Otherwise, everything was consistent. No significant or unusual transactions. If there were, we'd identify those. And then on the right side, no alternative accounting policies were discussed with management. That would be unusual for an organization like this. It's more typical for a commercial entity where there's some disputes on how to account for a transaction. Typically doesn't happen for an organization like PHCSA. And then on the bottom section here, we just refer to the fact that we look at the communication process between management and the board and how frequently that occurs and whether it's documented. And we believe that that process is consistent with best practices. So good result there as well. Like I said earlier, I'm going to take you through the numbers, but I'll take you through these relatively quickly. What you see included here are the assets of the organization at the end of fiscal 2023, so the end of September, with comparative amounts for the end of the prior fiscal year. I'm just going to highlight areas where there were significant changes from one period to the next. If there's something I skip over and you want me to focus on that, we can do that. The first section presented on this page are the current assets. Among those items, the first line you see listed there are cash and cash equivalents, about $1.4 million at the end of fiscal 2023 compared to $1.9 million at the end of the prior fiscal year. Some reduction there, mainly as a function of some of that cash was used to buy CDs. So if you look at the third line down from there, the certificates of deposit increased in fiscal 2023. So that consumed some cash. Also, there was about $550,000 of capital expenditures in fiscal 2023 that consumed cash as well. That was offset by positive operating cash flow that increased that. So I talked about two factors that decreased it. Then the operating cash flow that was positive increased that cash balance. So that gets you to that net $600,000, $500,000 or so decrease. The other item to highlight among the current assets would just be the balance that's held by Pinellas County for the benefit of PHCSA. So that's reflected as a receivable. There was an increase there, and you'd expect that, though, because the overall volume of revenue that was provided by the county in fiscal 2023 increased. So that's why you see that growth in that balance. Bottom section here are the non-current assets. The first line presented is cash that's designated for long-term purposes. Not a whole lot of change there, but it is a significant asset of the organization that's available to fund, for the most part, capital needs. Two lines down from there, the property and equipment, which is net of accumulated depreciation, about $4.7 million of net book value at the end of fiscal 2023, $4.6 million at the end of the prior fiscal year. I mentioned a minute ago that there was $550,000 of capital expenditures. That increased that line in fiscal 2023. Then that was offset by $475,000 of depreciation expense. That reduced it. So that gets you to that roughly $77,000 or so, or $75,000 of increase in fiscal 2023. And then last item I wanted to highlight here would be the second to last line. The dollars there are not all that significant, but that's the operating lease right of use asset. That's the new accounting standard that required leases be reflected as assets and liabilities. Under old accounting standards, you didn't have to do that. Leases weren't necessarily reflected as an item on the balance sheet as an asset and liability. So the impact of the new standard is to reflect that balance here. And then when I get onto the next page, I'll show you what the offsetting liability amounts are. Questions there? Okay. So this page presents liabilities and net assets. So this is the other side of the balance sheet. The first half of the page is liabilities. I'm not really going to spend a lot of time there because there really isn't much change period to period other than the balances related to the lease accounting. So if you look at the last line in the first section, that's the current portion of the lease liability. And then In the non-current section, just above total liabilities, that operating lease liability, that's the non-current portion. Current and non-current just means what's due within 1 year and then what's due beyond 1 year. So that's the roughly $66,000 that you see there. That's the offset to the asset number that I talked about on the prior page. Last section included here are the net assets or net equity of the organization in total at the end of each fiscal year. There's some distinction among the net assets that either include or don't include a donor restriction. The vast majority of the PHCSA net assets are unrestricted. So the aggregate total of all the net assets at the end of fiscal 2023 was about $8.3 million compared to $8.2 million at the end of the prior fiscal year. So rounded about $100,000 increase year to year in the overall net assets. And we'll see the components of that change on the next page. Questions there? Okay. So this page reflects activity in fiscal 2023. The two columns that you see on the right side are the comparative totals for each fiscal year. So you see the top half of the page is revenue, then that's followed by expenses, and then the bottom portion of the page shows you what the net bottom line was in each year. The columns to the left of that are just the segregation between activity that either included or didn't include a donor restriction. And the changes are going to be the same changes that were reflected on the prior page. But just focusing on those two columns that are on the far right, the most prominent items in that support and revenue section are the Pinellas County funding, which was roughly $4.6 million in fiscal 2023, $4.1 million in the prior year. So there was a significant level of growth there in fiscal 2023. The PPLC funding is the second line included there, $588,000 in fiscal 2023, $547,000 in the prior fiscal year. Again, growth there year to year. And then among the other items that are included there, the other most prominent individual line would be the program and event fees, $563,000 in fiscal 2023, $592,000 in the prior fiscal year. So there was somewhat of a decline in that category. The other line that you see towards the bottom, that includes a variety of items, the most prominent of which is in-kind contributions. The property that is provided by the county at either $1 or at virtually no cost is reflected as an in-kind contribution. So there's a revenue item and an expense item. And of that $598,000 in fiscal 2023, about $475,000 of that is that in-kind contribution amount that's included there. The overall total support and revenue was about $6.8 million in fiscal 2023 compared to $6.2 million in the prior fiscal year. So significant level of growth in overall support and revenue. Like I mentioned, following that are the expenses. The overall total expenses in fiscal 2023 were about $6.7 million compared to roughly $6 million rounded in the prior fiscal year. So again, an increase there in the overall expenses, but you'd expect that based on the growth in the overall support and revenue. The net bottom line in fiscal 2023, when you deduct the expenses from the support and revenue, was an increase of $77,000 in fiscal 2023 compared to a $272,000 increase in the prior fiscal year. One other thing to note here, the number's not reflected separately, but in the expenses is included depreciation expense. That was $475,000 in fiscal 2023. It was $450,000 in the prior year. So when you look at the expenses, you really need to take that into account because it's a non-cash expense that just gets reflected for accounting purposes. So I did want to point that out. Any questions on anything there? Okay, I'll take you through the rest of this quickly because all we do on the next couple of pages is take some of the information that I talked about numerically and put that in pie chart form. So the first one you see here is the composition of support and revenue in fiscal 2023 and what the components were. You can see the county revenue obviously is the vast majority of what's there. I'm going to flip the page because we do the same thing for the prior fiscal year. So when you compare those year to year, the composition of support and revenue is very similar in both fiscal years. We do the same thing looking at expenses. So the nature of the expenses is listed on the right side. In the pie chart, you see the blue shaded portion of that chart is personnel cost. So roughly 48% of the overall total expenses were personnel related. If I flip the page, you'll see very similar composition of the expenses. And you'd expect that because the operations are similar year to year. So the nature of the expenses are similar when you do that comparison. One more chart to talk about. This time, we're looking at the nature of the expenses and the functional categories. So the blue portion of the chart, the bar listed there, is the Parks and Recreation cost. The gold shaded bar is library services, and then the small component that you see to the right of those for each year is what's classified as management in general. So it's any cost that's not directly associated with Parks and Rec or library services. And again, if you look at those, pretty similar amounts each year and pretty similar in relation to each other for both of those years. Any questions on any of the charts? Because that's it as far as what I wanted to cover. So any questions on any of that? Okay, yes, sir.
Do you have the data by entity or
We do.
just by the whole?
No, we do. And when I mentioned the supplementary information earlier, the basic financial statements are on a combined basis, but the supplementary information is by individual Parks and Recreation entity and then library entity. So that if I don't have the draft with me, but if you look at the audited financials, it'll give you that information. And actually Lois has that right there. Does that answer the question? Okay. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. We'll get the audit process wrapped up shortly and get everything done.
Thank
Move on to the next one. Thank you.
very much.
Get a cookie before the.
I'll do that.
Oh,
Just go-
at least a sandwich.
Sandwich. Thank you.
You don't want to stay?
Believe it or not, no.
Come on, we don't bite.
Now for number 6, agencies will be with through this last month and everyone said to come back with some specifics, so I have, we're gonna look for a motion of the rules and procedures to, call a special meeting, which based is to be scheduled by the chair, the secretary, or a majority of the board. And for the majority to schedule a meeting, a fixer employee would need to send out and collect votes via email. And the special meeting must be for only one subject matter. So we need a motion if you want to adopt that.
Make a motion for that.
Second. Any discussion?
Did you say fix it employee?
Mm-hmm. Because it can't be any board member.
That's any fixed employee.
You should probably
Any-
designate somebody, but you don't necessarily have those positions yet. That you might, you can choose whoever.
But that language would indicate a library page could
Yeah.
call a special meeting.
If you said that, then I can.
Well, also it would count out since
So-
They're not an employee.
because it would have to be, the language is an issue.
You want to designate somebody?
Could it be a fix it board employee?
Yes, fix a board employee, that would
That's limiting.
define it.
We can specify it to
Well, around the
specific
1099,
roles
at least
of,
1099.
the fix a liaison, fix a administrative, or fix a human resources, or fix a attorney. If we just list out all the
List those
possible
four,
roles,
that's the full cost.
Is the
because that
idea?
would cover everyone.
The idea is when something comes up during conversations, kind of agreed upon, oh, there needs to be a special meeting for this. Do you have to have the set number of employees ahead of time, or could you designate who is most
Yes.
obviously available at that moment?
Well, the problem we've had in the past is obviously individuals contacting the chair, which
Right.
then becomes a problem. It probably makes sense to designate somebody who
Ahead of time.
reports right to the board.
Right now, that's 2 people. Oh, one because, who's an employee, not a contractor.
Right.
But we can change.
We can change the wording on
We can
that,
change
to
the
say
wording.
it could be the
I
liaison.
like your idea.
I mean, because
We
the
would
problem
just
is
list
if
specific roles.
Yeah.
Right,
that person isn't available, then you're right, you wanna have somebody else.
So we change it from majority, then we're gonna have HR. Director?
I would just say
I would say
HR,
fix the HR
HR,
fix
yeah.
the
and fix the liaison.
administrative, fix the liaison, or fix the attorney. I did all four.
We're doing an agreement. We
I
can
just
amend
have
the
a
motion.
I'll amend my motion to that.
Yeah.
The only issue, I guess, with Ron, since there's no confidentiality agreements or anything signed with him, he's just an hourly employee. There's no responsibility from us as board members. You know, he didn't even go through any vetting, there's no confidentiality, and there's nothing there. I mean, he doesn't have to follow the normal, you know, as a liaison, as an LLC, if I work for the county, there's certain things I have to do. We've talked about that. We don't require that here. As a result of that, there's no liability insurance, I don't have to be registered to the state. There's a lot of things that I have to do as an LLC before I can even work for Pinellas County. I have to do that, and part of it is signing a confidentiality agreement, I have to do that. He doesn't have that, and that's the only concern I would have.
Well, I mean, let's be frank what the position is. It's, somebody calls you up and says, I'd like to have a special meeting. Then you reach out to the rest of the board and you say, do you all want to have a special meeting on this subject? Once you get 5 people, and you call the meeting, you notify the chair that we're having a meeting.
And there really is no confidentiality.
There should be nothing more than what I
There's-
just said to you.
Exactly.
Because they can't relay what another board member said because that's acting as a conduit. So it's just basically finding out
That's what
what had the meeting
I'm
going.
sorry, Andy.
No, I mean, I think it should be very limited as to what that person does.
As long as we limit that, because the liaison position is that conduit. That's all I'm just saying, he is the conduit for all of us.
Well, let's put him last on the list.
I'm not trying to take it away from him, I'm just saying.
No, I
I
understand,
like the way you described it, because
but
that's what he's
that
doing.
it should
I
be
get it.
very limited.
Yeah, it's exactly just for the meeting, and this way, it just,
And Bill, he's not acting as a conduit, he's not acting as a liaison, he's acting as a notification, he's bringing that information in
Right.
and providing that to the chair.
I
So he's
understand.
not providing any additional information or anything else like that. I do see your
I'm
concerns.
fine with that.
I do see, but that's exactly what he would be doing.
I think it has to be limited like that.
and it wouldn't be confidential, because it's a public record, once we email it.
Right.
technically.
I understand.
If it goes more than that, then we have a problem.
Okay, any other discussion? Restate it, make it easier.
I didn't write it down, I'm relying on that recording, so that's what he's saying.
So,
Well, it's,
I I was gonna say, so we have it as, it says, may be scheduled, for a majority, to fix an HR representative, or fix a liaison, or fix an attorney to send out and collect votes via email.
I would also put in fix the administrative assistant in case that role exists. I would just put it in there.
Nothing wrong with
Had
doing that
historically,
yeah,
because
take that
Yeah,
one.
that's fine.
All in favor? Opposed? And then we talked about awards, plaques, and commendation. I suggest that if somebody wants to make a motion that we provide a plaque or similar remembrance for directors in 5-year increments beginning on year 5. And then we also provide a plaque or similar remembrance at the end of each board member's term. Do you have a motion, Jenny, we need a second?
I'll second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We don't have anybody from the public that wish to speak, so we'll move on to Jenny, your treasurer's report.
Everything looks good. Had an excellent audit. I was stuck in a place called Hillsville, Virginia, and unable to get reception to get on the call where he was talking to the director, going over the audit, so I'm the worst treasurer in the history of the universe. And I have one, accounting firm, Gary Appleby's CPA, I'm gonna look into for the, another quote, another bid for our next audit. And I'm just looking for a third, 'cause I don't wanna just get names, I want it to be people that we'd actually employ if we liked them, and they gave a good bid. So if anybody has recommendations on a third for the audit to RFP it out, let me know. Or if not, I'll just keep shaking trees. Cool. That's all I got.
Okay, we'll move on to East Lake Recreation. Okay, do we have a motion for the monthly financial for January?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on financial for East Lake Recreation? All in favor of accepting?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I have a motion to accept the director's report for East Lake Recreation.
I'll make a motion for that also.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any old and new business?
I do have some, old business. I was, not able to attend the last meeting, and I think I wanted to put some sod in, so I think you only approved it for half the amount that I needed. So I'd like to, ask for a motion to approve another $50,000 towards the sod.
You have a motion?
I'll make a motion. It's my fault that he has to do this.
Second.
Any discussion?
What did y'all approve? Last week.
$50,000.
Yeah,
45 to 50.
Well, the reason it was brought is it didn't come from your advisory board, it wasn't in your report to even ask for it. It was kind of, it wasn't
Yeah.
presented that way,
I know,
I think.
it was Bill's first
It was
reading.
I didn't know,
It was,
I had the amount and everything, but I only did it for 50 because you said, go ahead and make it 50, so I did. And it should have been for basically, what was it,
98.
98, okay. And we did have all that paperwork.
Okay.
I have it if you want a copy.
I'm fine.
So did the project double in scope, or was just the amount that was asked
No,
for was half of what should?
It was the amount I asked for was half, that I should have asked for.
The amount's $98,500.
Yes.
It's in his report, it's.
yeah,
it's-
Yeah.
any further
Using
discussion?
that's mostly.
So the motion is not to exceed $98,500.
98.
I'd say 100,000.
Okay.
Just so we know for later what'll go in the minutes, what the actual motion was.
So we're redoing from last month, so a total of 100,000. Any discussion more? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So the school district, how do I rate that then, because we approved 50 last time?
This is inclusive of that 50.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Just making sure that we're on the same page, thank you.
Mark, any more comments on your objectives report?
No, we're chipping away. Everything's going well so far, grass is starting to grow.
Mark, how many square feet was that? I'm just starting to price that.
85,000 square feet, so I got a great price at 80 cents a square foot for the sod and 30 cents a square foot for rip and replace.
Was it Josh's guy?
Yes,
So I'm not gonna go with Mike again, I don't think,
Mike did my rip and Josh,
cause he was like $1.25 a square foot last year or something.
That's 17.
Yeah.
Alright, good to know.
he got how to work.
Okay, so let's move on to Palm Harbor Library. We have a motion to accept the financials for January for the Palm Harbor Library.
Motion.
I second.
Second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We need motion to accept Palm Harbor Library Director's Report.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? My error on the
A
library.
couple of quick highlights, right, or?
Yeah, I was gonna say, because we go, I
Oh.
just realized, I just was looking and I
Well,
forgot to remove
first
the
let me
slide.
say,
You don't
we
need
no
slide.
longer need sod.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask her to give it to you, but you took care of it already, so. Yeah, that's under the, on the agenda, but it's
Yeah,
obviously
it
not for us. I won't repeat everything on the report here. AceCon, my first time attending it, big event, been doing it for a long time, 2016 or something like that?
10 years.
Yeah, so a long time. And a bigger increase in attendance, the vendors were great, the youth participating and everything was really fantastic. And we do have some personnel happening. We've got our new youth services library assistant. Our vacancy for marketing coordinator is now posted internally. And probably we'll take that externally relatively soon, although we do have at least one candidate so far. And then what else here? Just a reminder, correction. I'm very sorry, Jenny. The volunteer fair is on a Tuesday, not a Thursday, right?
Correct.
Tuesday, April 23rd. The date is correct for the volunteer fair, but the day is not. And so, correction there. But, and then as a reminder, for our open house, we're still accepting any kind of branded giveaways. If you or somebody who has a business and wants to get their name out there and would like to do so with a keychain or some kind of little giveaway, then we're willing to put that in our giveaway bags, go to the first 300 people. And the only other, a quick thank you to Lois letting us know about that CNCN Commissioner Town Hall happening here at Eastlake Library this past Monday, and I was able to come and meet Commissioner I hadn't met yet, so that was very nice. I appreciate it, Lois. That's not in the report, I'm just saying thank you. And then I neglected to include a couple of closures for April, so I wanted to ask Kathy if she could just shout those out really quick.
We will be opening late on Friday, April 19th. We'll be opening at noon instead of 10 because we're having our annual volunteer breakfast. And then the following Friday, we'll be closing early at 2 p.m. for the open house.
Those are both annual events. We always kind of either open a little bit later, close a little bit early for those two things. But sorry for not including those. I'll try to make sure I get those next time. That's it for me.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to Eastlake Community Library. Do we have a motion to accept the financials for Eastlake? Motion. Motion? Second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have a motion to accept the Eastlake Community Library's Director's Report.
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
One thing I wanted to add, not to the director's report, I wasn't quick enough. The Eastlake Library did add a CD from a different company. And I just want to reiterate that we should be making sure that we're sharing what CDs we have so we don't overlap. And thinking that we used to have the HR director keep track of this and sign them. We need to come up with a new solution for that idea. I should have brought it up with Jenny.
It was just
Okay. No, do we have a first and a second? We do have a second on the director's report, correct?
Yes.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any old or new business, Lois?
No.
No. Any comments on?
No, I'm mentally in Iceland already.
She's getting ready to go on vacation.
Just a note that I did have in there was that with our new phone system, there was no longer a bypass number. So if you need to call the library, you have to use the 2665 number, okay? We also discovered that when we installed the new phone system, it is a VoIP system, so it's a voice over the internet. So we no longer have a fax service available. Okay, we would have to invest in a cellular phone of some kind or an analog phone to allow for faxing. So we can scan to email, we can assist patrons that way, but they insist on the old-fashioned fax, we will send them to the UPS store.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Okay, we'll move on. Palm Harbor Parks and Rec, do we have a motion to accept the financials for January? Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Do we have a motion for the Palm Harbor Parks and Rec Director's Report?
So moved. Trouble saying that.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Any old or new business?
I just wanted to add a couple things, highlights,
Sure,
the director's report. We're super excited that we're getting to almost open our esports lounge. For those of you who don't know what that is, I guess that's the new craze amongst gamers. Got the idea at last year's FRPA conference for Parks and Rec professionals across the state. So one of our staff members has spent some of her time on the clock painting. She's very talented. So we've got all the muraling almost done and the equipment's purchased. So we're just awaiting installation on that from someone on staff, but hasn't gotten to that yet. That's one of the up and coming things. We're having a town hall for seniors for Pinellas County on Tuesday. Basically, Pinellas County is looking for ways that they can help North County seniors with certain areas. There's 10 different topics they have. And so we've been putting out press releases and flyers all over the place to see if we can get attendees. We have a few signed up, not enough yet, but hopefully by next Tuesday we will. Also, Matthew and I are attending complimentary, free of charge seminar. I'm gonna always call them Bouchard. I don't know, Marsh, McClellan, whatever they're called now. And it's basically on the top 5 or 6 HR topics and leadership topics and the hot button items. So we're super stoked and we'll bring back information for everybody from that. That's April 23rd, I think.
Yeah.
And I did make a phone call to our Cadence buddy, Brett, whatever his name is, because we haven't heard from him. And one of our accounts is earning great interest and one of our accounts is earning terrible, nothing interest. And that was last week, so I'm awaiting his response back. When I say nothing, we moved money out of our operating account into what we call capital. And we had 1 week left in January and I moved $200,000 over and earned another $200 in that 7 days. So we're earning about $1,200 to $1,400 a month by keeping that instead of in operations. We keep moving over whatever surplus we have for the time being. I can always move it back. So I'm waiting to hear if he can change because one makes 0.01 and the other one's earning about 3% or 2.5%. That was Cadence. And then today I had an exciting meeting with Pinellas County and the architectural firm that won the bid for the new building. We're looking at an October demo, so probably February, but they told me October. I'm just trying to gauge when we have to move people out and move things and get a pod. But it was very exciting to talk to them. They've got some great ideas and this is only beginning. They haven't even done survey work yet. So, but it actually may happen in my lifetime. So that it's been since 2007. So it's been a 17-year wait, but we're excited that it might be coming to fruition. Thank you.
Now, HR assistant, do you have any report for us?
I do not.
Well, I want to introduce everybody. Well, that's Shelby. Shelby Brennan. She is our HR assistant. Right now, she's doing the job of the whole office, but we're hoping to get her some help. But she's been in there for now how long? 3 weeks? Ish.
Yeah.
4 or 5 weeks. So everybody, this is Shelby, and if you need things, she's the person in the office at this point.
Welcome aboard, they say.
Thank you.
You're not on an island. Don't forget, you're not on an island. There's life rafts here. Have a good
I'm so well. Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair and members of the board. I am very grateful to be here. Everybody has been super nice, and I will, as soon as I know what I need, I will reach out.
Thank you, and everybody help her out.
Sure.
It's got a lot on her plate, right at the beginning, the first few weeks. Okay, going into agency old business, we had a fact-finding review. Bill sent it all to us.
Talking fact finding, right? So let me just kind of review just from a high level. I sent everybody out a copy. And there was really 3 sections of the fact finding report that I was going after. The first one, based on comments to the HR process, was focused on Parks and Rec, the employees itself, to look for potentially, is there leadership, is there anything going on behaviorally, is there any issues with the organization that we could do one-on-one discussions on. I spent roughly 3.5, 4 hours with 11 employees, and really nothing came of it. And I talked, and that's where really I talked about interpersonal skills and professionalism, professional demeanor, management, organizational skills and productivity, and team training was the focus of it. And literally throughout everyone, there was really nothing. It was just nothing but communication, teamwork, leadership. I mean, it was all very, very extremely positive. And so there was no gotchas, there was just a constant validation of the great job that Erica and the staff and the leadership team is doing with the staff. I walked away with that, and that was unfeathered, unbiased. This was just people talking to me. And literally after 10 minutes of talking to them, I could tell that they were telling me what was on their minds, if anything. So I felt really comfortable with that process. The other section of it was trying to get with Deborah directly. And I copied the 2 of you on some of those correspondence. And Deborah was swamped with her retirement leaving. She could not meet with me. And I had, and the only communication she came back to me, she wanted to know specifically the questions I was going to be asking. I went into Parks and Rec with the same 13 questions. So I had the same themes, and I just gave them right back to her, the same themes. This is what I'm looking for. And then she never responded to me, so I can't really comment beyond that. There was no response. And then the next portion of that was really what surfaced last session that we were together. Because when you looked at that performance review, typically most of the discussions were related, your operation and how your operation was running. But then there were some discussions about peer-to-peer, what's going on there? Is there some opportunities there? So then I met with the directors, and Waz, since you ran into both of those as a director for part of that interim period, I spoke with Waz, I spoke to Matthew, Lois, and Mark, and we spent roughly hour and a half. I think we spent 2 hours together roughly, but because I first time in this facility. But with that said, though, I was really trying to understand what some of the process and what some of the concerns, et cetera, were. Now, what was interesting to me, was on this side of it, they never saw the performance review. It never became public. On this side, it was. So Lois got a copy of it, and Mark had a copy of it prior to that. It's public information, I got it. But again, if you're really looking for an unfeathered, unbiased review, I would prefer to ask the 13 questions and respond to my questions versus responding to a review and the questions. So that was the only thing that was a little uncomfortable, from an output standpoint. But with all that said, I really walked, there was the directors themselves couldn't evaluate you and your position. I specifically asked that because that was a lot of Deborah's concern. How are you doing with your operation? And basically, none of the directors walk your shoes. I don't rotate occasionally and shadow you. I don't do any of that stuff. And so I couldn't speak to that. The only thing they could speak to is one-on-one interaction between, the directors themselves. And there was a couple comments focusing around that when you get passionate, basically, you may push back a little bit. And so is that, could that be construed as an attitude or whatever? That was the pushback that I was picking up on during the discussion. Was it major? I mean, this was just kind of the fact finding. And so that was the only thing that really jumped out to me from a discussion standpoint. You know, remedies, I mean, there's a couple opportunities for as we go forward. I mean, you guys used to get together on a monthly basis and have lunch, you could kick the tires, you could talk to each other, you could actually, if there was any escalation, you know, how do we escalate concerns that I'm having? And the ownership has to be with each one of us as directors as the first step, right? I mean, if I've got a concern with you, I'm gonna come and talk to you. Yeah, I would hope too. I mean, same thing with you if you're pushing back on me. That is a very formal process and, you know, informal process. I mean, we can actually work together on that one. And I don't know if you have to go back to monthly sessions where you were having lunch, but to me, more communication is better than less communications from a professional HR standpoint. And the other one, from a SHRM standpoint, I did pull out a behavioral 360-degree, behavioral from leadership performance. And it's outside of what the performance review is. I really want to be specific on that. This is looking at strictly behaviors. And typically you do it halfway through the year, and Lois would do it on the other directors and vice versa, and everybody would come together and say, this is what I'm feeling today, this is what my observations are. You kind of summarize it together, you can put your names on it, you don't have to, and so this is kind of where I'm at today from a baseline standpoint. If there's something from a behavioral standpoint, I'm not communicating effectively, or I'm coming across too passionately in this meeting, whatever it may be. There's things like that okay, how do we really make sure that we're being fair and objective to everybody? And that's another tool at our disposal that doesn't really cost anything, and we just plug that into and we just make it like a 6 month before the regular review process, and it gives you guys an opportunity just to kind of unvarnished. This is what people are saying. Your peers, what you're saying about you. This is not everybody. This is just the directors doing a behavioral on each one of the directors. So this is decent feedback mechanism to help if there's any issues there. That was kind of my two takeaways from the process. You know, I didn't say anything glowing, guys, to be honest with you. I mean, you guys can speak to it, but I mean, I just literally going through it. I enjoyed talking to every one of you. Everybody was positive. I mean, they love working here. They love the people. They love the interaction. All that is good, guys. I didn't, you know, as directors, occasionally you're going to push back. You're going to. And I get passionate myself. You can look at me and I'm a concrete head too at times. But with that said, though, you know, what can I do to improve? What can we all do to improve? It's not continuous improvement, guys. And so this is some of the tools that can help that process is really kind of what some of the takeaways are. I'm not trying to steer you, I'm just saying they're available and, you know, and you guys mentioned the lunches that you used to do. I think Lois, you actually brought that up, and I think that was probably a good thing at once upon a time you did that. You guys can measure your own performance on that one, but if that was good, again, if I'm sitting across from Matthew and if you're doing something that I'm just interpreting wrong, I would owe it to you and everyone else to talk about it. Or call you on the phone or whatever it may be. So that's kind of what my takeaway was on it. I'll open it up for any questions anybody may have or any elaboration. That was kind of my output on it. I didn't see anything glaring. There was just continuous improvement opportunities, yes. But let's face it, every organization has continuous improvement opportunities, guys. And if we can recognize it, understand it, baseline it, and start improving from that, it's an engagement survey, we're doing the right thing. So I will be quiet now. Madam Chair.
Let's start with the board.
So when it mentioned the transactional log over 3 weeks, were those just the 6 phone messages and 7 emails? What is that?
Well, that was my Deborah contact. I was trying to contact her to arrange a time where I could spend an hour with her to sit down. And I offered weekends, Saturdays, evenings, mornings, at her house, whatever I was just trying to give me an hour of your time before I can ask these 13 questions. And just look for the response. That's all I was trying to do. And so I did multiple responses. You know, if she wasn't looking at her emails, at least I'm getting on the phone to her, even her phone messages. So anyways.
Okay, so you made reasonable effort.
Yeah, I think it did. I mean, you guys were copied on at least the emails, not the phone messages. But I mean, I was just trying 13 times over the course of 2 weeks or so, 2.5 weeks. And I wish I could have talked to him, to be honest with you, I wish I could have. Because it would have been a very objective, and it would have been just the facts, I mean, it really would have been, I wasn't going in for anything, I was just trying to do the understanding, peel it back a little bit, so anyways, thank you for that.
Any other comments from the board? Discussion? Okay, thank you, Bill.
You're welcome, thanks, Bill.
Okay, we had tabled the Palm Harbor. We can table the review.
Well,
Which review?
It says
I
Palm
think we
Harbor.
did table the reviews, but then
It's
we
table review.
did we untable them,
We
Phil? I mean,
untabled
I
it,
didn't
we
think, I
tabled
think
it.
we voted to still table, I believe, was,
We left it tabled.
correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Not mine.
I think they're tabled.
All three of them are sitting there.
The HR ones, but
The HR, not the reviews.
that says Palm Harbor Parks and Rec Director's tabled review.
Nothing in her review was tabled.
That's
The
what it's not-
reviews
I
were
think it's
were
not here or
approved.
there.
Her salary, her compensation was approved. It's done.
It's done, so we're good.
I was talking the other one, okay, I thank you.
I know what you're talking about.
Thank you, yeah. That one should have been, and that should be in your personnel file.
My review?
Well, the new one, right? It
Yes.
should be, yeah, that's the only one that should be in here.
Do we wanna untable the HR reviews to discuss along with the fact finding? Do we feel we need more conversation? How did the directors feel?
Feel about untabling the reviews for discussion? What's that?
You don't have an HR review done, I do, on that one.
Oh, no, you're talking about,
You don't have
The
anything.
HR reviews, yeah, there wasn't,
oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
there
Yeah, I
were
don't-
three.
So, okay.
Are you making, I'll make a motion that we untable the reviews.
Discussion.
Why?
That was gonna be my
That was
question.
gonna be mine too, was the purpose, I guess it's.
I guess my reasoning would be along with Jenny, this gives us an opportunity to move on from it. Tabled, it's always gonna be there. If we want to refute it, if we want to get rid of them, if we want to rescind, if we want to rebut, then we need to untable them in order to actually have the conversation. And then my question would be the same, why were they tabled? That's the only question that I need an answer for to determine whether or not we should untable them, is why were they tabled in the first place? What specifically, and maybe Bill can speak to it, what was specifically said in the tabled reviews that was unfounded, untrue, false?
Well, I think there was, in Erica's situation, the review was written a lot more sternly, and the evaluation process was very low in the overall points and percentages. The other two were extremely high. And so as a
You're
result.
saying the reason to table them is because one of them was different than the other?
Well, extremely different. So if I put my statistical hat on, it was more than one standard deviation different what the data is. So typically in an HR world, if you go through 3 standard deviations, more than one standard deviation out, there's an outlier, something's going on there. And that's what the discussion, the fact finder was really driving to. You need to drive that at that point in time. We need to understand what the differences is. Because I could have just a personal something against you, or you may have done something to me that actually is warranted. But that's why I appreciate the board giving me the opportunity to go through the fact finding, because if it's more than that one standard, I just did the math and it was greater than a standard deviation difference.
Okay, standard
just-
deviation makes sense to me because I'm a finance guy.
Yeah.
But in terms of what was false in that, if there was lies in there or something that wasn't accurate, I'd like to know what those are. So we can say, let's get rid of them, let's shoot them down. But when I read them, I didn't see anything that was factually egregious. It just was an opinion from the HR director. We asked for this opinion.
And the recommendation was no raise, and it was basically, so she went even further than that. She was saying, I want you to have a raise, I'm taking your money away, et cetera. So there were some strong
Strong
Since
opinion.
we're discussing the
Strong opinion.
contents of the reviews, should we untable the reviews? Because here's what happens with this board that I've seen, is that, and I see the directors doing it too, where we say, is it fixed, everybody? Do we wanna talk about it anymore? And everyone says, no, we're good, and then we move on and it keeps resurfacing. So we would like to go through it and discuss it and put it to bed. Because it's not productive for it to keep bubbling back up, well, this wasn't fully resolved. Well, let's resolve it now. So since we're discussing the contents of the review, I think we should go ahead and vote on whether or not to untable the review. And if we vote no, then we stop talking about it. If we vote yes, we can continue this conversation. That's my personal opinion.
Am I allowed to say anything?
Oh,
As the
sorry.
center focal point of the conversation, if we untable this, I'd like it put to bed. It's been 3 months of my life, and colleagues' relationships now have gone to hell because of this. So if we're gonna untable it just so we can have another hour of long meeting and do nothing with it, please don't untable it. But if you're gonna untable it and actually take action to do the things you said, Dan, and get to the bottom of it and put it to bed, Jenny, like you said, more power to you. But right now, it just needs to stop. It's just not a functioning, positive workplace to have this continuing to bubble up. And it does every single day between us somehow, some way.
If Deborah was here, I could probably make some rationale to untable it. Without Deborah here, guys, we're just gonna be talking blah, blah, blah. We're just gonna be talking about what the words are, and we're gonna say it's from our perspective, not Deborah's perspective, because she can't even defend the process.
She had an opportunity to defend that, and she chose not to,
That's
though,
correct.
right here.
That's correct.
So her input was solicited numerous times,
Yeah, right.
and she refused. So I'm in agreement now, thank you guys for changing my mind, I'm in agreement to table, or not to, or to untable it, put it to bed, because Deborah had an opportunity to defend her statements. She's not here to defend them anymore,
That's
to be done with it.
That's the open end, that's what
Right.
my concern is.
But I'm still here to defend what I was accused of.
No, I agree, and your team was there, et cetera. So, I mean, there was a lot of good stuff that came through the process from a validation standpoint. I think we're doing the right stuff, we are. We've got a great engaged team, that's all good. Yeah, the only concern I got about untabling it is that review, we don't wanna get into your personnel file. We don't have, that's not in there. You never signed it though. So, I mean, I don't even wanna, I prefer to leave it tabled myself and just move on. That's my opinion. We'll discuss it.
Motion
We have a
second
motion and a second, we ready to vote?
to untable it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to untable it. All those in favor of untabling it, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
4-3.
4-3, or no.
It remains stable. The next thing was, East Lake Community Library's letter to the board. Discussion, asked for, Dan, you requested.
Yeah, at the last advisory board meeting for the East Lake board was asking me what the response was, and I said, we didn't get to it. So they were requesting some sort of response to that letter. And if you haven't read it, I can say in a nutshell, it was about the FICSA boards, our activities, how we operate, how we conduct business, rules of order, and then also about the board's decisions on Lois's review and the process of tabling hers, and how that was not necessarily what the East Lake Advisory Board felt should have happened for Lois's benefit to table the HR director's review. There are 3 directors' reviews that were tabled, not just 1. So I don't know how to respond to the advisory board. I am one member of that board, and I'm just saying that they requested a response.
We all read the letter.
Yeah, and question, did the tabling of all 3 directors, was the tabling of the HR review, did that affect their review process and or compensation?
No, they were done independently.
So that would be a moot point, in my opinion.
It was peer-to-peer and it was outside the scope of
Correct.
the advisory boards.
Correct. So by tabling those, it had no effect on Lois's, Mark's, or Erica's review.
Well, it was, we don't know that. Had I, in my review of Lois, if I got a negative feedback from the HR director, I would have inquired further and explored that at the advisory board level to say, hey guys, this is the review from Deborah. How do we want to respond? Is it accurate? Are we missing something? What is Lois doing that we don't see? Because as an advisory board member, I don't spend much time in the library, believe it or not. So my interactions and my review of Lois is based purely on my interactions with her at these meetings and at the advisory board meetings. If we had an outside person come in, say an employee or the HR director, in this case an employee, say something differently, then we would have adjusted or at least had a conversation. But we didn't have that conversation because the advisory board did not see those reviews. I did, but I did not share it with Lois or the advisory board. So there was no chance for them to actually see what the HR director said about our director. You see, that's the issue.
So that speaks to the way we handled it, because the HR director did the reviews, and we got the advisory, we got them together as board members. So we had to deal with it before the advisory board would have ever seen it. So if that's the case, do we want, based on our processes, maybe we should consider if we have an HR review that it goes to the advisory boards before they send, so it's meshed in as opposed to being separate? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well,
That
the
was what
process
board
was broken
Yeah.
completely. And so,
we know that.
you know, the feedback was one way and one perspective. So the East Lake Advisory Board perspective was given. Now, had those been tabled, we would have been a little upset. But I would argue that the East Lake Advisory Board's review process is several standard deviations away from the Palm Harbor Library review process and Parks and Rec and East Lake, right? So if we want to compare how reviews interacted with each other, like you did with Deborah, you can't say, well, we take what my advisory board says as gold and ignore what the HR director said. Now, it worked out in the case of Lois that they both were saying similar things. In Erica's case, it didn't work out. So rather than take them both, have a discussion as adults and say, what's going on here? Let's talk about it. We tabled it and said, under the rug, swept. So that's why we have a problem as an East Lake Advisory Board with the review process.
If I may, go back, what Sandy said, I agree with you totally on that one. If we would have done that prior to the advisory board, if that was an input into the advisory boards, then the advisory boards could have communicated, Deborah would have been part of that process, and she would have solicited, she would have been told, all information would have been pulled to help you formulate what that next step is to write your review.
But it's not us as an advisory board that makes the final decision. It's this board that makes the reviews.
No,
We're supposed to be taking the inputs from everyone. So I agree that the process needs to change. We should have a separate subcommittee meeting on that. But as to answering John's question, yes, we as an advisory board were not happy with the tabling of the HR director's review. And the only reason why they're not happy is because I said, it's not bad. And Lois was the most upset by it because it didn't negatively impact her, but it didn't get to showcase her from an unbiased outside perspective.
I don't feel like it showcased anyone. Honestly, to me, those reviews were incomplete. There were, the one positive thing that she said was about the passports. You do so many good things. Passports are not the one thing I would get hung up on. I mean, you do so many different types of things and reach into the community in different ways, and reducing people to one action is not, I didn't feel like she did the legwork for those reviews. I've been to all the entities and seen the work that the directors do, and there was nothing added from those reviews from the HR director. And same thing for Mark, it was incomplete, so it wasn't something that would have helped or made you sound better, because we see the work that you guys are doing. So, you know, we received the letter. I think if the fixed chair wanted to send an email response of, we've received your letter and taken it into consideration, thank you for your time, would be appropriate. But
That's
I
fine.
think we should go more in depth. I think that they're pointing out that our process, the way we did it, they're unhappy with our process. And we have all said, we are unhappy with that process as well. We have not settled on a process that we're happy with.
and we asked our HR director to craft the review process.
And maybe that's our job. It's not, it's the job of this board. We only have 3 real jobs that we're assigned. One is to conduct the meetings, oversee the finances. Our other job is to hire and fire directors and then do the review process. That is the only job this board is supposed to be handling. Am I correct? That is, so we're stepping out into the weeds, guys. That's what I think. We're into the weeds, we shouldn't be. We need to stay in our scope. And that's part of the problem we're having, is the board is overstepping their scope and neglecting what we're supposed to be focused on. And if I can understand where it would cause, when you start stepping over, all those things are judged. And fairly so. If you do an action, you're gonna expect it to be, have people have opinion of that action. So, in response to the letter, I read through the letter. They definitely made some points that we need to improve. We need to look, that's almost a review of the board, as opposed to the review of any director. The review is saying, board, fix a board. We're not happy with how you do things. And I think we need to really dig into that, not at this meeting. We need to, at a workshop, we need to look at that review process. We keep talking about it. I've been on the board since my 7th year. We've been talking about this since before I came on, because it was already a process before that. But we've never taken and made ourselves sit down at a workshop and focus on that one issue. It's a one issue that every single year is a problem, and we keep making changes. We make it in, and then we're like, oh no, that change didn't work. Oh, that was a bad choice. We're so focused on what Deborah did. It's one thing. The real responsibility sits with each of us that are sitting on this board. That's where the real responsibility sits. It is not the employee's responsibility, it's ours. So I understand, I think, as I read through that letter from, I saw lots of places we can improve as a board. And I think, that's what we have to scope from it, and
No, you're being so positive. There's so many things in that letter that there were so many things in that letter that were incorrect. So address it all. I mean, does East Lake Community Library want us to answer the letter, every paragraph that was in the letter? I mean, you guys requested that we have a parliamentarian. Well, we do. We have an attorney that sits here every meeting that keeps us in order. Do we follow Robert's rules? And I thought we did follow Robert's rules. I don't see anything out of order in what we do, and Sandy brought Robert's rules with her to the last meeting, probably because of the letter. I take issue with over half the things that were in the letter, and actually how it was submitted too. Sent right out to 4 county commissioners, not all the county commissioners, and one of them that was sent to doesn't even have a representative on this board. And that's how it was presented. Why wasn't it done a little bit more, respectful to our board? Why was it done like a slap in the face? I think it was submitted totally in the wrong way. The issues are valid and should be brought to the board. There's no issue with that. It's how it was presented was, why was it done that way? My question.
To answer that question, well, two, when I came to the last advisory board meeting and the request was what was the response, I did mention that you brought Robert's Rule of Order and that the meetings were much more organized in the past, and that was a positive, oh good, so we feel like we're being heard. To respond to the why it was sent to the county commissioners directly in addition to me and Sandy. They felt strong. My role here is to be their voice, and they didn't feel like I was being their voice. And they felt strongly enough to bypass me and go directly to the county. They felt that the issues surrounding this fix-it board were above the fix-it board, and that someone has to come in and fix it, because we can't fix it ourselves. So they went to the governing body of this board, which is the county.
Okay, you see that, and because I think when we get a letter, whether you get a negative review, basically that's a negative review of our board, that's what it was. And they sent it to our superiors, which would be the county commission. Well, we need to stop and not be emotional about what's been said. Some of it may be true, some of it may not be true. If we can scope out what we can do different to make things better, that's our job. Let's talk. No, but I'm just saying that just
to clarify.
Yeah, it's not that, it's just, I'm saying, we can't, it may not be 100%, it's their opinion. You can't say opinions are wrong, that's how they felt. And it's whenever you get a negative letter, any company, you all get, I'm sure you get negative letters from patrons. It's up to you to look at it and say, well, I don't agree with it, maybe there's a kernel of truth in here that I can make a change that will prevent someone from feeling that way again. And I think that's what the board, we can do. Oh, we can move forward. We can't change what happened yesterday, but we can make things better going forward. And I think that's all, maybe that's what we need to say, would that be a response that we could possibly make? Let's do the best we can.
I agree with you totally, because you started in January, you start talking standard work, standard processes and procedures, talking to workshops to escalate some of these issues. Again, what are the key things that we have to work on as a fix-it board, and really start driving through some standard work on some of these? If HR, if the process is it, or the review process, whatever, I mean, we were talking escalation back with Trish and you back 6 months ago, that something happened 9 months earlier than that. And again, what is it? Those are procedures that we need to button up and really feel comfortable with those. And then, do they change? Absolutely, they may change going at a time, but if you don't have a standard to compare ourselves to, we're not gonna follow the same work. And that could be an issue, because everybody interprets it differently. I mean, the advisory boards, I mean, everyone, we were talking about 2 sessions ago, how do we rank people? You look at the last several years, everybody's ranked between a 4.5 and a 4.9. Guys, there's no standard deviation, everybody's ranked there, that's what the ranking is. So there's not any feedback, there's no objective evidence, they're just, this is a circle, I'm giving you a score, here's your score, buddy, and that's what you end up with. Performance review is, it's the good and the bad, it's really understanding what that ranking, that score is. So there has to be work with the advisory boards to really frame that better too, because otherwise we're just gonna be rubber stamping what a 4.7 is. And it doesn't matter who writes it.
And that's one of the complaints they had, we didn't give enough guidelines. That was one of the complaints. That falls on us, falls on us before, and we can improve what we can improve. We can't change everything. We can't change how everybody feels, but we can move forward. And we talked about, I brought it up my first meeting last year, we need to have a workshop on the review process. We put it off, at least the 7 years I've been here, we talk about it like right now, then we drop it, then we start in September and October saying, oh, the review process. Now it's upon us. Then we're like, well, we can't change it because it's too close. All of you that have been here know that. That's what I've seen 7 years of it. So we need to make a workshop and sit down and take the time it takes to come up with a process that works. Nothing's gonna be perfect, but it can be better. That's my opinion on how,
I agree that we need to take the time. I feel comfortable personally with the steps that I've taken. I'll just say, I sat down with each entity director, asking what they'd like to see change with FICSA, what things they needed, asking how they'd like to be reviewed, when they'd like to be reviewed. The general feedback, we didn't hate the idea of a 360 review to get that full, robust feedback. Nobody thought it was the worst thing ever. I don't know how we would do it with Mark, we'd get really creative, But through that review, started identifying some changes that we might want to look at. You know, when I reached out to Deborah repeatedly to ask questions I didn't want to ask in a meeting about her credentials and her history to try and have a better understanding of the structure of administrative versus HR, asking her to track her time on admin versus HR, I got no response. So I know that it probably was really disconcerting to see me ask those very direct questions in a meeting because I had been put off so many times when I asked them via email, trying to not do that in a room full of people. And the director reviews made me very uncomfortable because they were not complete. But I think there's this impression that I was chasing after the HR director trying to have her removed from her position. What I was looking to see was we obviously have more of an admin need than an HR need, or they're two separate things, and Deborah's strong suits, the past HR director strong suits were more administrative. So I was looking at a restructuring, possibly making that recommendation. But I did come to our last board retreat with, this is what we need to have for our review process. So I did my due diligence on that. And we all agreed, the person in that role said to us that they would take ownership of that process, they had that under control, and we said, okay, we'll see what you come back with, you go ahead and do that. So I don't think there was some massive failure that we entrusted HR to run the review process when we set expectations and they were tasked with it. When it became clear that those expectations weren't being met, I started asking questions first. I tried via email, I tried on the phone, and I didn't get responses. I'll give you that later, and it never came. And then I had to ask in a meeting, and then it got very uncomfortable. I'm very conflict averse. I broke out into hives. It's super fun for me. But it was not a witch hunt. And I think that that narrative is concerning for the directors too, because they may feel like they're next. And that's really not the case. As a board, I think we have taken steps to try and problem solve this. So we know the review process is broken, and we don't have an HR director so it's us. We do need to craft a new process and look at, so my question is, since we're spinning off into that conversation, how do we do that? How do we move forward on that action item? What can we decide today to move that forward?
I think we need to make a workshop where we could spend 3 or 4 hours working through it. We say it and then we make incremental, but we've never sat, at least come out here, that we have a full workshop on that topic.
Did we reach out to the county yet about assistance with HR?
Well, we have a committee working on it right
No,
now.
I didn't know if we had taken a step on that.
Nancy
not
Given
here.
had addressed this at the ad hoc committee level. And she did discuss the fact that she had reached out to several people involved in HR at the county level. Unfortunately, the one recommendation they made, the SPC Collaborative Lab, they'd be happy to set up, a full day workshop where they would act as consultants, and the charge was a mere $6,000. So immediately, just.
But I know Ron did reach out. He talked to Dave Edgars because Dave's the one that said he would work with staff to help us with that. So I know Ron talked to Dave, and Dave was working on putting him in touch. I don't know where it went from there, but Ron was active immediately after the meeting. So I'm sure he's.
So we're taking steps.
We are, and we have a workshop on hiring the HR director next week, I guess.
Yeah, so, if we could, because we met with Ron and Nancy. It was a very productive conversation, and it's challenging because it's a unique organization. There's lots of different ways you can go, and it's been kind of, the whole process has been on the table, sorry to use the word table, but in discussion for a while now, and certainly before I came on board. But my understanding is, assuming, we know that the ask is out there in terms of getting county involvement, and unfortunately we can't, reach into our pockets for $6,000 quite yet, for the independent folks, but at least that was our initial reaction. But there may be time to at least partially address, this is one of our goals, as we're thinking about HR needs and ways that, we can work with existing companies and potential new staff or new services or whatever, to also start talking about during that workshop, we also want to fix this evaluation process in a way that makes sense for this unique organization.
That
So-
needs to be a separate meeting.
Probably, but it could at least be brought up, and see if we do have some county involvement, they may have perspectives on that. We wanna utilize that, if not address it fully at the workshop, at least bring it up and see, whether we could continue to pick somebody's brain about that, and getting that independent, feedback would probably be very helpful. Even if we don't eventually hire a consultant to help with some of those things, from what we can understand, there are some resources available at the county that maybe can be useful to us in working that through. I'm not the total newbie, now Shelby's the newbie, but.
He's so happy about that, you heard him.
I know, yeah, so, yeah, you should check out the swimming pool up on the roof, it's really nice. But I, for what it's worth, I wanna kind of repeat my sort of doughy, optimistic assertion that I've maybe kind of traded around here and there before, is that a lot of the things that have happened that have been contentious are not, in maybe legal or financial terms or even structural terms, major disasters. I really do firmly believe that despite there's some hurt feelings and there's some strong differences of opinions of things that have happened until now, everybody here wants a process in place, wants things to be clear and simple. I hope everybody feels how I feel, which is that I'd like to come spend maybe 20, 30 minutes on this meeting and then just hang out with everybody for a while. And have cookies, of course. But, for what it's worth, I want to kind of repeat that, and just say, like, yeah, I think there are some steps in place, and I think the urgency and the motivation is good. I do at times definitely want to escape to Iceland, but to take a break from it. But I think we're gonna see some pretty positive things in this next year, and my hope is that some of the things that we've struggled with as peers and maybe as an organization totally, we'll be able to kind of eventually move on from and build up from. So sorry for occupying so much space about all that, but I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion that we have a meeting on the review process for May 8th.
On a Wednesday?
That's usually advisory board.
And it's usually advisory board meetings.
For, yeah, we have one too.
Well, and you too, will you have yours on the second Wednesday?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, second Wednesday?
Yeah, it's the second Wednesday. isn't
For the
it? Your
library
advisory
and
board
for rec on the Palm Harbor side.
We're the second Tuesday.
meeting? Oh, second Tuesday, okay.
So that doesn't work.
Thursday, that's what we had to do with the other one.
We did the
We
Thursday.
did Thursday, is that what it is?
We had to move to Thursday.
May 9th,
Thursday.
in the evening?
I have a conflict,
Wrong calendar.
Good.
Three. That's personal, and I have 2 works.
That gives us some feedback from the previous meeting
Right,
Previous workshop.
that might be useful,
right, for the most part, yeah.
but it's on the calendar. So, motion to meet on May 9th, Thursday, 6 p.m. somewhere, to talk about the director review process specifically.
Second.
Everybody, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we have a meeting.
Time and location, or
To be determined.
work it out?
PBD.
I have to take it back, I'm gonna be out of the state. But you can still have the meeting without me, I just looked at my calendar.
I have a conflict, so 2 of us.
It's 2 of us now.
Then it.
When they don't know about that.
Zoom?
I don't think we can we?
Can't vote on
It
something,
has
you
to be
can participate, right? Yeah.
I will be participating.
I'm glad that because can we do a Zoom meeting? I mean,
I can
Is
do
there,
the
is there
16th.
another time that you
I
guys
can do
work?
the 16th.
on
As
Thursday.
long as you have a quorum present at wherever you're meeting, other people can participate by.
Participate, but not voting, but.
Right.
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 Participate.
Assuming the directors can come, because I think that would be helpful, I won't be able to on the 16th, because I'll be at the Florida Library Association annual conference. It's also that morning we have the budget
I was gonna say, you're coming back just to do the budget.
I'm coming back for the budget presentation and then go back to Orlando after that. It's also my birthday.
Happy birthday.
On the 16th.
Look at that.
It would be after our meeting.
Be 21.
You too?
May 23rd,
May 23rd, I'm good.
Said May 23rd?
May 23rd, Thursday, 6 p.m.
East Lake Library's available if you want to choose that date for the community room.
May 23rd, I'm looking.
This is specifically for the review process.
May 23rd.
Yes.
Yes. 23rd. 23rd.
Good.
23rd is 3, 4, 5,
Works.
6. Get 6. Yes, Bill.
I think not to muddy the waters, but I think it would be good if the representative from each advisory board was there as well.
Yeah, I think.
So, I mean, this should be plenty to choose from. So I'm comfortable saying 23rd still works, but.
It's a good idea.
Leslie, you're up, wherever you are.
Absolutely, yeah, good idea.
Kind of quiet tonight.
Alright, so. Wait for Bill to vote.
Would you want me to reserve the community room since it's available?
Please.
Is it 6 p.m.?
Oh, okay.
See, I can change mine. It's at a different date. Now it's the 23rd. Yep.
Waited for you to vote.
There's 6 people.
Okay, 6, yeah.
I'll be out of the country.
Are you going somewhere good?
St. Martin.
Well, the only thing I can tell you is that it sounds like you're never gonna get a full board.
Right.
6.
But you have 6, which is, and we don't know about Ron.
You have the directors and the advisory board, I mean, listen.
And we don't
We
have
have
much
enough
short.
for
Yeah.
Okay. Vote. So on
No, we
page.
can't vote, but we can.
No, yeah.
No, we can vote, we're voting on the date.
Pick on the date.
Date, we're voting on the date. Okay, all those in favor of having a review process workshop on May 23rd at 6 p.m. at the East Lake Library, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Madam Chair, 1 second, just so you're also aware from the ad hoc committee, Ron had asked me to reach out to our insurance broker who's doing the training that Matthew and I are attending. And I have a phone or a Teams meeting with them. I'm hoping Ron can be there as well. I just got the date tonight. But they have a plethora of things also HR relevant that they could help us with in the interim, like a review process. So maybe if they're interested, we can find out what it would cost to have them come to that May 23rd as a HR professional to help. I don't know.
So in their perspective.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if they can come to the April 4th workshop, but we'll see, but I just wanna let you know that was happening as well from the
Okay,
committee.
wait, Ron's not here, I have a pretty report. Then on new business, we'll move on to new business, so we had the HR director's exit interview. And that was.
Yeah, I asked Deborah to send it out. She did for everybody. You saw the questions that were asked. Ron and I went, Schultz, and we basically reviewed the questions that she had pre-answered. So she gave us that sheet when we arrived, and we just went through it and clarified any sort of we tried to go in depth a little bit about the different topics. Those were the only questions that were asked. No one submitted questions to me to ask her, so that's what I just went with. And it was I thought some of the things, her answers were interesting and should be included in the committee meeting for the HR and also the review process. And Ron was there, so he'll champion that. A couple of things that came up that weren't on those answers that I identified at least as potential issues were surrounding data. The way I didn't know this, the way it works is like payroll and everything went through HR, and employee records and all the useful data is held there, and with her gone, they gotta have someone to oversee that. And so we have to be super careful about who has that access. Do we give it to the directors? How do you bifurcate it or put it four square so no one else can interact with other entity data? The CDs was something I brought up. She is a signer on that. She is still a signer on that. That's a problem, in my opinion. So these types of technical transition things, I came up and Ron and I were kind of sitting there like, well, we can't discuss this really because, so we just sat there, sucking our thumb for a minute, and then I'm bringing it up now because I don't know if they were resolved or not, but that's something that should be resolved. She mentioned, she's like, well, maybe I'll just send it to Sandy and say this is what to do. And I said, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm not gonna say anything. So, but besides, I wanted to capture her thoughts on her opinion on how the directors report to PHCSA and where the HR falls, even or above or below that. And that's one of the things that's gonna be discussed at the next committee meeting. I wanted to capture her opinion on it because she was on both sides of it. She's the only person that held both roles. That was it. It was uneventful. I didn't have the questions that you wanted answers, or else I would have asked her. But I didn't bring up any of the director review stuff because I was like, I don't think she wanted to talk about it anyway. But if I had those, I would have asked her. I have a feeling she would have answered it.
I apologize, I should have said I thought about it, but I just, talk myself out of it.
We need to clarify the CD is probably the most important thing that you need to do.
Yeah, we've taken care of that. I notified Live Oak Bank and I got the paperwork necessary. I'm waiting for the paperwork from Farm Alliance. That was the first thing I thought of was because we have Susan Schuler, myself, and it was Deborah, okay? She was supposed to be added to all the CDs, so I had asked my advisory board, and for Dan to put it on also on the agenda for tonight so that, I assume the other directors know, but just in case.
Well, I'm gonna need to have somebody, sign off on mine, because it was just me, Deborah.
How do we wanna work that?
And Erica, what did you do?
I don't have any CDs.
But is she signer on anything
Not on
besides
our
the CDs?
accounts, just not on our checking accounts.
Not on, nothing else?
This is second signature, I thought.
I kind of like the idea, and it's just a thought of treasurer.
I was just.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't want my name on it as, associated with it. And if I was in treasurer, I wouldn't take on that liability.
The only concern is that if the treasurer changes every year,
Right.
then we have to do that every year.
Well, we do it for the.
We do it for the signers on the bank.
If it's not a problem, then
It's a problem with the institutions that we're working with. It's a hassle. Yeah, the CD comes due, and you're gonna redo it, I mean.
Yeah, you have CDs too?
Yes,
Yes,
we
we
do.
do.
I also, I'm the only person that can sign right now. Matthew doesn't have
I mean, I
That's never true.
submitted
You
my,
never got signed for
no, I
check?
submitted them, but it didn't happen. This was last year. Yeah.
That's a problem. Yeah, I don't know, with Live Oak Bank, they simply send us the documents, okay? We fill them out, we sign them, and we scan them and send them back.
Cause Kate
That's
was
right.
watching
Not
documents.
that difficult.
I did,
Last
I
year
know
we
that.
did this, it took us like 2 hours. When we did the camera.
Really?
It took us 2 hours, yeah.
Okay.
Solution.
I can't
Shut
believe
it down.
that.
It took me 2 minutes.
Really, it shouldn't take too
No, it shouldn't, but it did.
We could eliminate CDs from our repertoire, which I'm not agreeing with, or do what the bank said they were gonna do and become a broker of the CDs. Kind of like what Mark's got. We use one broker for the entire entity and then then it's just one place that we deal with. And then we don't have to worry about keeping track of the main reason why we have Deborah sign is so she could keep track of what the entities are
Right.
doing,
And
make sure we're not
expense.
double dipping
Yeah.
and not going over the FDIC insurance. So we could adopt a policy where we get our CDs through one broker, or we adopt a policy where someone else signs, like the treasurer.
I like my money market account. It's making money and it's just.
Yeah, the money market's a good solution too.
I mean, I made like $12,000 last year. I don't know what the CDs make, I have no idea. But I have more than $250,000 in there as well.
I don't mind my name being on things, but I don't know how the next treasurer's gonna feel.
Yeah.
So I don't,
Well, it'll be part of
Yeah.
the job. If you guys vote that way, then it has to be part of the
It
job.
makes the most sense.
but I guess my other question would be, is it necessary or should just each of the entities have signers within their individual entities?
Then you're now putting like, who, the advisory board people on there? I mean,
Well,
who are
like
you gonna put?
director, assistant director, the only anomaly would be Mark. So maybe if Mark needs a backup, it would be fix the treasurer or fix the president.
Or could it be another director from another entity?
Yeah.
But if Deborah was only tracking,
Right, that's.
Yeah.
I think the treasurer can track, but doesn't need to be a signatory.
Yeah.
So why don't we just do
I
that,
like just looking at
eliminate
it.
that, and the treasurer is responsible for tracking and
Well, I
identifying.
think in my case, I needed to have another.
Yeah, and in your case, Mark, it could be another director or somebody on the board, or Andy said it, and I was thinking it myself, maybe somebody on your advisory board.
Yeah.
You know?
As long as it's.
Well, you're sitting right there, Bill, I mean, it's, you guys are twins.
I already asked him that.
That makes sense to your
Yeah.
We just have to make sure the process is tight from a fiduciary responsibility standpoint. You don't want people just taking it, just going to.
Well, that is, and then you have the oversight of
That's
the
what you have to
treasurer
do.
and the
Better
accountant,
be
so you
watching
have.
me closely.
Yeah.
Always watching.
I did wanna ask if you guys wanted to maybe collectively get together with Brad just to discuss that possibility of all the accounts.
Centralized broker
Mhm.
for the CDs.
Is that something you guys, or are you happy with the current
It
setup?
sounds like a motion.
I'm happy with what I have.
We're
Well,
happy.
I wanna hear their feedback, I wanna force them into it.
No, I'm happy, we do our
Because you
shopping
are.
around for our CDs, we're at about 5%. Okay, interest rate 5.2%, so we're doing very well with the
I think
investments.
I have a couple at 5.6 right now.
Yeah, so,
So our only issue is that we need to track it to make sure we don't go over limits from the same.
right,
Right.
right, and that's why we
That's
always
definitely
brought
what
it
it is.
to the board.
Exactly.
Yeah, when we did purchase any new ones and had Deborah tracking to make sure. also.
Prior to that,
Well, even before I did mine, I just went to each director.
Yeah,
That's what I just said,
and asked,
could we just call?
Mhm.
Hey Erica, do you have any
"Hey,
CDs
where-
at yada
Where are
yada?
your CDs at?
Mhm.
Are you using any of these banks?"
That to me seems like a real simple solution.
And still, I think the board would have, be good to have a tracking, some
Yeah.
central tracking as well, but that would solve them. And then
Right,
we just send
without
a notice to the
signatures.
treasurer that this is on just
Oh,
add
by the way,
them to
Jenny, I
it.
opened a CD
Yeah.
at ABC Bank
And
and
then-
I already talked to the
Right.
other directors.
It's simply an FYI.
Yeah.
Treasury report. Right.
Yeah.
for the
I
treasurer.
would make a motion for this.
Okay, we need to have a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we have the treasurer report include a list of all CDs of
I second
You guys, you need to list all your CDs.
Treasurer report,
Back information.
I make a motion that the treasurer's report include a list of all CDs held by fixed entities.
Second.
Bill, second.
Any more discussion with that?
I think the list would serve as our fiduciary responsibility, make sure we're not over the 250 limit.
Right.
And then anytime CD is purchased by an advisory entity, they have to tell the treasurer so that the treasurer can look and say, oh, can't do that, thanks. Which might be an issue.
You know what, we just muddied the whole motion, so let's.
No, the motion-
Those are
Yeah,
comments.
No,
let's
the
make,
motion's very simple.
let's go back, say the motion and we'll vote on it.
I make a motion that the treasury report include a list of all CDs owned by fixed entities.
You got a second.
We need
I
a
second it.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Well, yeah, Jenny didn't vote. Oh, no, you did.
She said aye, she was very quiet at that one.
Okay.
But going on the same, since we didn't have any comments about that, 'cause we were rushed right through it.
Oh, sorry.
So, Jenny, so it's up to the directors to make sure you have all that information prior to the meetings. So you can send them emails and say, hey, by such and such a date, make sure I have all your information. That shouldn't be your responsibility to go gather it. It should be their responsibility to send it to you.
And really, it should just be, are there any changes to your CDs? Because they've already communicated amongst themselves, say, do you have it at this bank? Like Mark said, and I think that's great.
Do we already have a listing like in the HR office of all of them?
I can find out.
You can find out, maybe there's a listing already.
I'm sure there's already a list of them.
And then can you give a copy of that to Jenny, then she.
It's probably on the
There's no
computer
sense in
somewhere,
having to
Shelby.
start from scratch, you know?
Well, it's all in our reports. Each entity's got a balance sheet.
It shouldn't be
Oh,
hard to
it's on balance
recreate,
sheet.
even if it's
Right.
starting from scratch.
Right.
Hey, it's not that hard.
Well, there's not that
Well,
many.
it has an amount, but I don't think it has what bank it's.
I think it does.
Mine does.
Does yours?
You know, I'll look at them all again and make sure that I have all the information, so there's like the last 2 digits of account numbers and things, and then I'll confirm if I need any more information. Thank you.
Next
Yeah,
one.
Anything else on the treasurer?
Okay.
Used to be such an easy job.
Paperwork, everyone, that's right.
Okay, we had questions on the payroll, we had some glitches this month on payroll, getting into it, and it came up with a question about who would be on the Altera administrators, if there's a supervisor, and then we also talked about possibly, would it be easier if you just do payroll from your current QuickBooks that you have? That's one of the, we had problems. It was a couple of people couldn't get into their payrolls when the Deborah changed the administrator.
Has that been corrected?
Is that correct?
Is it for?
It's
Well,
not,
we're not administrators. You're not administrator, Lois, anymore, are you?
No, but it's just for, I have all of the privileges necessary for my own entity.
Correct, and I do now
Yes.
as well. I think
That's
originally, poor Shelby, I called her on Monday because my credentials changed. I can only see 4 employees out of 42. That's when I reached out to you. Because right now, the only people at Altera that are listed as administrators are Sandy and Shelby. So I didn't know if that was in the best interest of our organization to have a volunteer and a part-time employee have only admin in case there's a problem and you're on vacation or off and you're wherever you're going out of the country. Should the directors still have the ability to be administrators on that account and speak to
we were
Altera?
also not notified there was gonna be any changes.
No, it just happened.
But that has all been corrected?
Yeah, I can now access, yes.
Yeah, I mean, we
You're all
also
comfortable with that.
used to have access to one another's teams, so I'm assuming like, so we could be a backup to one another if we ever needed to be, but we don't anymore.
Why don't you?
Because it got changed. That's the difference
Well, and the
between a
question is,
supervisor and.
why can't it be changed back? Is that an issue?
That's on you guys. I mean, you have to vote that in.
I think they're asking, what do you guys want?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it makes sense. I don't know. It sounds like you think it makes sense.
I mean,
I don't know what Lois and Mark.
I never look at their employees, your employees, but I mean, to me, that's comforting knowing that I've got 3 peers who in a bind, cause I can't delegate that down. Unless I was taking some kind of leave of absence or something like that. Who then could take care of what needs to be taken care of.
Cut to the chase. So
Why did it
you want a 20-minute meeting, so let's just cut to the chase. Do you want to be administrators on each other's accounts?
I don't.
I think there needs to be an employee of this organization that is a full-time vested employee, and it doesn't have to be me. I don't need it. It's easier for me to see 42 instead of 100 and whatever it is, and have to go by home department. I don't think it's good practice to only have a part-time employee.
You used to be administrators?
We all,
everybody?
yeah, I believe we all were.
It doesn't hurt to be. Doesn't bother anybody to be, does it? I mean, I'm just
I
asking.
think it's a matter of privacy, confidentiality issues with access to other entities' information, right? And
Well, is it
that might be
employee
a concern.
information or is
Yeah,
it,
it's
I mean,
employee
it's background information and all that?
All it is your name, your phone number, your address, your rate of pay, your department code. We're all directors. We had access before. I don't know why it changed. Maybe there's been a policy or
They're actually
some.
all public record.
Yeah, I
I
don't
was
see
about to
any.
say the same thing, I thought it was all
That's all,
public.
that's all stuff you can get anyway, so I see the
Anybody can.
point.
So
So,
wouldn't that
so-
be rectified once the HR person is hired?
but we don't have that yet, so,
Okay.
but if you guys used to be, okay, I move that we make every director and administrator on the payroll system. Is that what it's called? Or do I refer to it as Altera?
Require a motion? There wasn't a motion when it was changed.
Well, I don't know, it sounds like it does, so.
There was a directive given to the payroll company to only speak to those two. That's the issue. I don't care if I can see the other
And Deborah
employees.
gave this directive.
Yes, it was in an email, and unfortunately for Shelby, she was stuck in the middle of it because she had to forward it out on Monday.
I'm sorry.
It was all a good learning experience, but we have resolved most of the issues. But whatever is everyone's pleasure, I will certainly work.
I'm hearing
make
it said
up.
that we have to tell them what to do, so
Okay.
if we have to tell them what to do, then we have to do it as a
Okay.
unified
They're
board, so.
probably gonna want some kind of minutes or something, that's
Right.
normally what happens. Action of the board to allow you
I don't
guys to
think
do
they
it.
needed it.
So
Did
moved.
the action without it.
Well, that was somebody who had the authority
Okay.
at the time.
Well, Sandy has the authority as chairperson to speak
It's
on
true.
that.
Well, then you can direct,
And so
you guys
Shelby,
just, if everybody's okay, then Sandy can contact them and get done.
or Shelby can, she's administrative.
Was.
Right.
If,
I
if
I
you
guess the
all
question is
decide
everybody's okay with
Have
that.
at it.
that's what you want.
I just moved the motion, so I don't know.
Well, you need a
I'll
motion.
second.
No, I'll let it
Second,
go.
third.
Well, I'm not okay with Sandy having access to all this data.
No, Sandy doesn't
I'm not
wanna
saying-
have
I don't wanna have
access.
access.
Sandy said she
Right,
doesn't want
so I think we need to have someone at a level, I think the HR director should be the admin of this. And until that person's solved, I don't think each entity should be able to see the personal data of any employee that's.
So you wanna leave it status quo until there's an HR director.
Well,
Right.
we still
Well-
have to define if we wanna do administrative assistant.
Well, whatever,
That's
whatever,
what-
whatever position you
We're
decide.
admin, I think admin assistant is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
An HR person. Temporary.
Well, no, they don't wanna have any of the directors. Dan's point is he doesn't think that any of the directors should have access to the other, which, I mean, I don't understand.
Correct.
I don't
Well,
see the
and my
issue.
question would be why, it's a public record, it's not personal,
If
private
it's public
information.
record, then I can go and see what everyone's
You can.
social security.
You can do it
Through a FOIA,
Social
well,
security number.
right,
Cause
Is
you
that
could get,
part of
you
it?
could get people's names, their rate of pay, that, you know, a lot of that information.
anything without personally identifiable information is accessible for a FOIA request.
But we keep copies of social security cards in those public records, Andy, so
Well, you can't, you have to redact them.
You gotta redact them.
I'm just
If I
saying.
came and did a public records request, you would have to respond, but you'd have to redact it.
Right, you have to redact that information.
Right.
I'm just
I don't
under
think
the,
it was when mine was requested, that's all I'm saying.
to explain my thought process is the less data that people have access to, the less problems that can occur. So the less I know, the more there's a wall there, the less burden on you guys to accidentally do something that doesn't have anything to do with your entity. It's just,
How long have they had this access for?
Since we started with Altera. But
And it hasn't
just-
been an issue up until now.
I think maybe you're mishearing the message. I mean, it is nice to have a backup, but Trish has access as my assistant director to any record she needs with the exception of my time card. So I think what we need is more just to be able to speak to Altera. For example, on Monday when I couldn't get in because I was trying to help Matthew on the Friday prior and my login credentials were changed unbeknownst to me, and I couldn't get into the program to help him. So when I called Altera on Monday, they didn't want to take my call because I was no longer listed as an admin. So all I'm saying is maybe what this board needs to understand is, just so if there's a problem, Mark can pick up and say, hey, I can't get into Altera, can you help me? Matthew can do the same thing, or Lois can do the same thing. I don't need to see Lois's employees. It's actually easier for me only to see mine, instead of hitting home department and not seeing 112 employees. I don't care about.
So the question is, so as we sit here today, you guys cannot access your own accounts. Is that
No,
what
we
I'm saying?
can access our own. I can
So you
see my
can.
employees,
Right.
yes.
There were some issues during the transition.
But now it's
Okay,
fine.
and they have been rectified, okay, and Shelley's hair was, Shelley's hair was brunette on Monday.
Well, so right now, it's okay.
Yes.
So there's no action the board needs to take.
In the event we need to speak to Altera though, it's gonna be those two, just so you guys are aware.
Okay, so you and I are not on the same page. on this
We're
discussion.
not, I get that.
In my opinion, if you can have access to everything, that means you can have contact with the company that provides it.
I can have access to the account if it's functioning correctly.
So if there's a problem,
Correct.
so I would go back to the board saying that you all should be able to contact.
Speak to them, I just want to have
Right.
access to call, so that I don't have to go
For
through
your
poor
each
shepherd.
account, for each of your own entity.
If we can't entrust the 4 entity directors to this level, they shouldn't work here.
Yeah,
Amen.
And not only that, knowing HR payroll systems, I work for a large payroll company, individual securities can be set up. What Erica's asking for is just when she picks up the phone,
Right.
that they will talk to her. Not that she has access to Lois, Mark's, or Matthew's account or
That's what I was
payroll.
trying to.
She just wants them to talk to them.
Is
So
that option
that's an
available?
easy setup by the phone call to Altera saying,
Yeah.
these people are allowed to talk to you but not get access. So the limited access. Your point is what keyed me on that was Trish having access to everything but
That
yours.
she can do that.
So that's absolutely, that
The
can be
board's okay
done.
with that.
I can't change a password.
No, I understand that.
We just want you to be able to
You
pick up
guys
the
won't be able
phone.
to pick up the
and
phone
have
and get
somebody
help.
talk to you.
That's,
There's a
that's fine.
problem like there was on Monday, so they were.
Cool.
But you have a problem with Sandy having these access.
And Sandy had, I believe, she found out had a problem with that too.
Yeah, I was a
Well,
She didn't know she
may
got
have-
the
She
access.
may have the administrative access, but she doesn't have the credentials to log in.
Oh, I think she does now. No, I don't. Oh, you don't? You just have.
So,
Oh, you
so she can pick up the phone, like what we're asking for them, and say, help.
That's not the part that.
Yeah, she doesn't have the credentials to log in.
So I think
Stick with that.
Yeah.
you all understand that that's okay. And Shelby will contact.
and see if we can get that.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah, so you guys can have.
it was a surprise to us, that's all. Nobody knew it was happening or why it happened.
Can I just jump in for a moment? Wherever we go with human resources, that will be fine, and I certainly am as solid as a rock. I'm not going anywhere, I'm not gonna disappear in the night, and leave people needing payroll. But it's a concern, I got a jury summons and it's the night before payroll, and my heart sank. I wanna make sure that it is ultimately a backup, that's all. And okay, right now, I'm good, and I really, I'm a solid individual, so you can be sure that I will not sleep until everybody gets paid. However, it will be very nice to have that other person come along, so that we have some.
Oh, and Shelby, so you don't lose any sleep, I did speak to Deborah Chancey and she said they could do our payroll in a heartbeat. All we would have to do as the 4 directors is approve our timesheets and then
That's
they,
good information. I
so
didn't
then
know
that way you
Thank
do have a backup, so
Thank
don't
you.
lose any more sleep.
Okay, that's good
You
information.
could just tell the judge.
I'm
You need
going
be
to.
excused.
I'm going to.
Because 75
You
people
better
won't
believe
get
it.
paid.
I will. I very much.
Yeah, so just to have it as additional context, even though we're moving on now, when I couldn't get into my payroll to do anything for myself or any of my staff, I was immediately comforted knowing that I could pick up the phone and talk to any of the 3 and help me, but then that turned out that was not the case anymore because a problem that did not exist before got fixed without us being told about it. And I've been in other organizations where we've had that peer-to-peer thing. You can either either having it or being able to temporarily delegate it, you know, that kind of thing. But, you know, so when I found out that that was not the case and you couldn't get in and I couldn't do anything, I was like, oh, well, shit. This sucks. But I never looked at the other entities.
I didn't
but
either.
I'm comforted to have that backup, but if not all of us want it, then that's that, but just wanted to put that in there.
Which is temporary. We've got the temporary. Once we hire a new person, whatever their title may be when we finish, they would be the backup person, so then we have two, so we would have them covered. So we'll just do this for now, we'll get through the next, we'll try to get, everybody can call.
And Shelby, you're just gonna call and make sure that we can speak to them, that's all.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
No other security changes.
Okay, get that. And Jenny had sent us information about employee versus independent contractor rules per the IRS.
Sandy, did you talk about QuickBooks? I saw it on the agenda, but
Oh,
I
I just
didn't.
passed, we haven't. I just on
Okay.
the agenda,
Okay.
if the possibility, but at this point, can't change anymore.
Okay.
I think, I'll just pull that for myself. When I put on there. Employee versus independent contractor rules per the IRS. She sent it to us. I read through it. I really think it's kind of an accountant's job.
Well,
Because we-
Ellen had reached out saying,
Oh, okay.
do we think this person's more of a W-2 than a 1099? And I kind of gave her the answer of we don't really tell Ron how to do the work. But as a private contractor, there was kind of that question. So I figured it was a good question to just bring to the board to make sure we're doing things the right way, that if we want to make sure that he's not an employee. So like if Ron wanted to send somebody else to do his job, he couldn't necessarily delegate that out, and that's one of the qualifiers, that he couldn't just send somebody else to do it. But then again, like my husband's a private contractor,
Attention, the time is now
Just
8
send
o'clock and the
somebody
library
in
is now
hospital
closed.
to work, they
If
would
you're
have
not
to
here for
clear
the
through
FIXA
the
meeting, please make your
hospital.
presence known and we
If
will
Ron
resume
wanted to
tonight.
send somebody
Thank you.
else to do the work, that's something we could clear once we vetted that person. So I just wanted to have that conversation to make sure everybody felt comfortable, because you had brought up we should review you. And it's more, not that we review you as an employee, but we should review that relationship. Do we wish to still contract, or do we need that job done still? So I just thought we should discuss it. Any thoughts? It's real quiet in here.
I read through, I deal with that all the time with 1099 employees in construction, and whether they're, they work for you, you tell them what to do, you tell them where to be, and you dictate everything. They're not really an independent contractor, but we don't dictate to Ron what he has to do.
Mm-hmm.
Even if one of those items or two of those items that's on the list is borderline, questionable, that doesn't take him out of the category of being a 1099 independent contractor. And I don't think it's anything, I think we're all comfortable, I won't speak for everybody, but I thought we were all comfortable with that position, not being an employee. But a review, yeah, he needs to be reviewed. We review everybody. I mean, we should review him, we're not reviewing the position that he's in and the services that he's supplying for us. We're not reviewing him as a personal, as his person. So.
Yeah, the email I had sent to Ellen, because she's our CPA, and since she asked the question, I thought, let's just make sure the whole board answers. I did tell her, I said, we don't tell him how to do his job, and he isn't based out of any of the entities, he doesn't have regular set hours, we don't provide him with training or coaching, and we expect him to be an expert in the field. And then I just mentioned the review, and so I thought we should kind of discuss that, but.
I think it's more of a review of the contract, Jenny, based on all the 1099 contractors I have. When you call it a review of the employee, that's when it gets sticky.
Yeah, so I just
And
wanted
what
to be
triggered
really clear
this
on
red
that.
flag was, we were coding his wages to fix-it wages. You can't do that, it has to be, well, that's how it was coded on the spreadsheet that we all got, and when they reimbursed, so I had to go back in 2023 for the whole fiscal and move all his wages in my books to, I think we created an account called Fix It Contracted, contractor. But that's what triggered it in the accountant's world.
Do we pay you as a 1099 today? You pay no taxes and everything, right?
Well, he didn't get a 1099 bill at first because he was under wages. Well, he was under wages.
Yeah.
And we were paying his taxes on it.
No,
No, he was under the reporting numbers. He was under $600.
so in
No,
QuickBooks,
it's just being
he was
coded
being
wrong.
entered
Oh,
into wages.
That's, okay, yeah, that's
So
good.
that doesn't trigger a
So
1099.
how do you file your income
I
tax?
now have a 1099 and I will be paying my own taxes.
Yay.
He called Deborah asking for it, didn't you, Ron, or reached out to Deborah? Or-
In a conversation.
He didn't.
And then Deborah reached out to
You
the
paid one
accountant.
last year though for your income tax?
I did last
You did, 'cause that's the funky part, it's so many.
No, no, wait, I did.
Because
You only work-
technically.
you only work for a year.
Yeah.
I know.
He's been here a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started in basically May of '23, so.
Last year was the first year.
This is our first
tax.
tax
File
year.
your income taxes
I
for
now
that this
have a
year.
1099.
Yeah.
He's got.
He's got it, it's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I'm just trying to understand what you, okay. So, yeah, you meet the criteria for 1099, you're, yeah.
Ron won't be here, he's going over tax evasion.
The review is a little.
Is that Leavenworth? Is that what it?
That's why he didn't get a 1099 either.
Because he can't do
Alright, so we established
Yeah.
Ron's gonna stay. We're gonna keep Ron as a 1099.
Yeah.
I didn't think there needed to be a change, I just wanted to bring
It's
it to
good.
everybody else.
Brought it up, right, everybody's up to speed. And, Andrew has given us a memorandum about social media.
Let me just give you
It's on the agenda, but-
a real short version of this. I gave everybody the memorandum. It's important for every FICSA member and every director. The US Supreme Court came out with a decision last Friday. Kind of an interesting decision on social media. In essence, what happened in this case, it was a city manager. And so they look at public officials or people that have the authority as a public official, which is all the board members and the directors, because you also make decisions for your entities, okay? In this case, what happened is the individual had a private Facebook page, which there's nothing wrong with that. They became the city manager of a city in Michigan, and they started using their Facebook page to respond or to say things that were going on in the city. So let's just say if Erica was using her page and talking about things that were going on in rec, no problem, okay? But understand this, if we have a particular resident that starts making comments on your Facebook page, hey, I don't like the way you're running pickleball.
That would be the sport that would complain.
Right, or the tennis courts, as we had a true example of, and we got sued, which we won, by the way. And,
Yes, we did.
and you decide, I've had enough of this. I'm not taking this crap anymore, and you just block them. Well, that's what happened in this case. And the Supreme Court said, you violated their First Amendment rights. Because you have created a public forum based on your position, not your private position, but your public position, which we've always talked about is separating, public from private, and this is a reason why. Now, the one interesting thing about the case is that the courts went on to say that if you put a disclaimer that, hey, this is just my private Facebook page and I'm not going to have, it has nothing to do with my position, you're probably in a much better position. They didn't say absolutely, but it just goes back to what we've talked about a lot, which is the separation, right? This is how you get into trouble. While you're just promoting something, now people are responding to you, and then you're angry at what they're saying and you block them. Now you potentially could be sued for First Amendment violation.
So, been in this community a long time, and I will get messaging on my personal Facebook page in the messenger part, asking a question about rec. Would it be your advice as legal to say, please message info@parksandrec.com, not even entertain an answer at all?
If you will consistently keep your personal one personal, if you're willing to accept it to getting public comment, you could do that, knowing that you can't ever block anybody who comes up and is nasty.
So
But
when my
if she put the
friends,
disclaimer at the top of her
I
page
won't do that to
saying,
you
this is my
anymore."
personal page,
Yes.
my opinions are mine, I've seen some board members do
Which
that.
is, you can do that. they weren't, but the court wasn't absolute. They said that it would be a
Do
much
better.
better position for you to be in if somebody sued you. And said, well, I was, that was a public forum. No, it wasn't. It was a disclaimer. So you would have to, in essence, put the disclaimer and say, yeah, even though I have a disclaimer, I'm still gonna do all this stuff.
I just had mine locked down, nobody gets to my Facebook page, period.
I
Unless
do
you're a friend,
fundraising,
period.
so I have to make it all public.
Well, you can have a public and you can have a private.
Yes, yes. But just to be, this is an unbelievable situation. This is the US Supreme Court. So you're talking about an issue that has always been out there. We haven't seen these opinions. We're always worried about them. Well, here's an example. So I wanted you guys to be aware of this because it just came out. And to make sure that you didn't run afoul.
There you go.
So how does this relate to the issue that I brought up when the Pride Display employees at Palm Harbor Library before that? They were commenting on the Palm Harbor Library's Facebook page.
Which is fine.
As a library employee delineated on their title. So do we have to, I think at that point we passed the motion that we need to come up with a policy for all fixed employees to have a social media policy.
Right.
So that employees of the East Lake Library aren't on the East Lake Library Facebook page saying, you gotta vote for this person, or this is what we believe.
Right, and we can adopt that kind of policy restrictive in certain manners, right? So we have to look at that to see if I'm not on duty, can you still preclude me from doing that? I have to look at that issue. You could absolutely do it if, as anybody that's on duty, you can't do any of those things. You can't access that. You can't take those positions. But I would have to look at that last part. I've written a bunch of social media policies. I think we had one that we adopted here, a general one on some of those things, but not on this, Facebook, all this stuff is still nuances or somewhat.
Cause then you get into, well, I'm not on the clock, you can't violate
Right.
my right of freedom of speech.
Right.
That's where you don't,
But there are things that you could say that you
Right.
can be terminated for.
sure.
Yeah.
But my concern is if I'm a library employee commenting on the library website, and then someone sees it, and then they come to me, comment on my personal, and I block them.
Right.
Then they can say, you're
Does
blocking.
that employee speak on behalf of the
Well,
library?
that's the other thing.
I
So
don't
the
know.
library has to decide who's empowered
Right.
to speak on behalf of the library. That's a very
Well,
specific set of
that's
people.
why you guys are in this kind of position, because each one of you individually, while you're not, and the case talks about this a little, do you have the authority to speak on behalf of the entity? There's a lot of times where we would say, no, you don't, even though you're a member of this board, you haven't been given the right to, we've had that issue here. You have not been given the right to go speak to so-and-so based on the right of the board. And so the cases talk about that. However, there's also the perception and whether you play up to that perception. That's the whole thing that we talk about. Do you wear your FICSA, nameplate when you go to the county commission and you stand up? Are you acting or making that appearance, right? So we need to, that's one of the things that we always caution, that's in your bylaws. But you're right, we probably should have a better, directive on that for the employees. We'll need to work on that. But so, just don't mix your.
Well, and we're not allowed to do anything that disrupts their flow of business. So us speaking on behalf of any entities is disruptive also. It would be counterproductive.
Right. But the point, really, it's an interesting point that this would even come about. But First Amendment rights are really broad and public forums, I've litigated those issues as to whether or not places are public forum and not. In fact, we've adopted the policies in each, well, not Mark's. But it's.
Poor Mark.
Well, you could. Mark, if you
Sorry,
want.
bud.
But we have declared certain areas that are not public forum. So people cannot come in here with a camera and go in the back here and just start
Oh, I
looking,
remember that.
videotaping employees. That's the whole reason why we declared those areas non-public. Because if it's public forum, I can be on the sidewalk like we did with the Pride stuff and have the flags and like everybody was doing and protesting. That's fine, that's a public forum. doesn't give them the right to come into, Matthew's office and then say, hey, I want to be able to videotape you and have you answer these questions. So there is some areas that we can control from public forum. So I just wanted, in case anybody has any questions, let me know.
Yeah, thanks for that update, that's actually really interesting.
I'll be at it this summer.
I'm still
We're on
locked
it
in.
right now. Okay, the committee report, liaison, Ron?
Well, I didn't write a report this month because I'm still dealing with what we did last month, and, so, I am working more on the motion stuff that we're working on so that we can put together a more concrete group of policies that the board has adopted in the past. Before Deborah left, she sent me minutes for a long ways back, and I'm only gonna go back, starting 5 years back, and we'll just see what we're doing. In addition to that, I'm now preparing to start working with the advisory committees, and when I go to each one, I go to the meetings now, but now I have a different mission part of that. And we're going to talk about how they got formed, who appoints them, what the powers do they have, do they lead the meeting, or does the director lead the meeting? And we'll just find out how each one works. And the goal in that is to find best practices and see how things should work. And not to interfere, but at least to understand how each of the 4 advisory boards are helping the directors and providing information for the fixed board. So you should get some kind of product on that, at least to begin with, maybe even as early as next month. But those are the things that I'm spending my time on. I used to meet with the HR director every week, and I promised Shelby I wouldn't be doing that to her, but I did tell her that if there's anything I can do to help, she should let me know and do that. But I believe some of the most important work that this position is going to be doing is going to be in the next 2 or 3 months at these workshops to help PHCSA be what it really wants to be, and in that whole process, it'll be more effective and it'll satisfy the stakeholders, I guess is what the advisory boards are, and the people out there who use the services of the organization. So, didn't write anything down, but that's what I was thinking about doing, and you'll see something by next month on those, at least both those 2 issues.
Okay.
Got other things to do, just let me know, board, I'm here.
And we talked about the policies and what we were gonna do next with those at some point, all of the policies.
Yeah, I'm working on something that then
Yeah.
we can say, yes, we still wanna go that way, or no, let's correct the course and do this. So that's why we're gonna start with a small bite and see if that
You don't want the big
fits. I don't want a big bite. When I got a lot of minutes, I realized that there's a lot of stuff out there to look at.
Thank you, Ron. Ron Schultz is not here for the ad hoc committee update. We do have the meeting coming up on April 4th, which is a couple weeks, right?
2 weeks from Thursday.
2 weeks from tomorrow. So anybody else on the committee have something they think we need to know ahead of time, or we just wait for their report? I think we're working on it.
I think, because Ron asked each of us to give us some information, some things he asked us to follow up on. And he's, I think, working on consolidating all of it, and that'll probably be helpful with the agenda in terms of what could be discussed and finding common threads and all that stuff. But I think he was we were all pretty energized after that, but he definitely was energized to try and dig into that and put it all together as best he could, so.
We want to get moving, so we do have to, that's a position we have to fill. Any reports on the marketing or insurance committees?
Ron did say that he was gonna take the HR director report and apply it to the meeting as well.
Okay, so you'll put that in there, okay.
What I'm planning to do, hopefully by the next meeting, is have something of a QR code, how we doing, set up. Now, I'm gonna see if I could use the Google Drive software that we have through the Palm Harbor Library. We have our emails through Google. I think there's a survey tool and a QR code link that I can use. I've never done it before. Let me see if I can get that going. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, please come see me and help me. The idea being seeing if we can get some sort of feedback mechanism from all the entities, or at least see if it works, and then decide if we want to do it.
You can do
And
it
then-
in workspace. Yeah, you can use like a
Yeah,
Google survey.
like I've done the Microsoft surveys.
Yeah, Google Workspace.
Workspace.
So there is definitely a survey tool there. I just don't know how to link it and where the data goes and who has access and all of that.
Yeah.
But if we can figure that out, I'd like to, by the next meeting, at least have something to share with everybody. And then as for insurance, I make a motion that that's closed because I missed the mark on that one, didn't get the time to help with the insurance issue that we faced.
If you wanna close the committee,
Yeah,
then probably a motion in a second.
motion to close the committee.
Discussion on closing the committee and insurance committee? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we close that committee.
So do you need any assistance from our IT to help with the access for Google and?
I have access, but if I don't know how to use the tools or I need permissions,
Yeah.
I'll just contact you.
That's
And
fine.
you can put me in whoever.
Sure.
It's good to test it out, because I know like with Microsoft, when you do the survey feature, that depending on how you set it up for public versus private access to it, you can give people too much or too little access, so it's good to play with it a little bit and find out.
That, and we have just a reminder that our workshop for the HR, whatever we call the position, the new position will be April 4th, 2024 at 6 p.m. at Harbor Hall. Just an announcement. And the next meeting will be April 17th, 2024 at 6 p.m. at Palm Harbor Parks and Rec. We have a motion, anything else? We have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Oh, okay.
No, you said.
Second, yeah.
Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.
Workshop.